I think Georgia, to me, is the scariest team. I think Ohio State's the best roster. The scary thing for me is we've seen Kirby Smart in a one-game season now a couple of different times. The Texas game comes to mind. Who am I thinking of right now? The Tennessee game post the Ole Miss loss. And, I just don't know that there's anybody better in college football in a one-game season than getting their team ready to get dialed in, and it feels like we're rolling into that time of the year. Yeah. I mean, that's a great segue into Georgia. Am I too high on Kirby Smart and the Thanos snap effect that he has here? Where do you sit on the Dogs when it comes to, their potential to win a national championship?
Well, and listen, obviously there's a Georgia helmet behind me, so everyone always gives me crap when I talk about the Dogs. But listen, it's been it's been so hard to be an announcer these past 4 years. You think it'd be easy because Georgia's so good. But it's also made my job difficult because people are get mad at me because I only talk good about Georgia. It's what do you want me to talk about? They've won 2 of the past 3 national championships. They won how many games in a row? It's hard not to talk positive about Georgia because they're the kings of college football and Kirby Smart's the best quarterback or coach in college football. It's people are you're such a homer. I'm okay, you try talking bad about Georgia the past 3 years and have my job. But anyways, Georgia a year ago. What kept them out of it? They were banged up. You go back to the SEC championship game versus Alabama. And listen, Alabama won the football game. I'm not here to make excuses for the Dogs. But watching that game multiple times, Brock was a shell of himself. Ladd was a shell of himself. They did not have healthy bodies to go in there and compete with as good of an Alabama team as Alabama was last year. Yeah. And it showed. And they lost that football game. Had opportunities, but ended up losing it. What has been Georgia's big issue this year? They've been obviously lack of big plays on the outside have been a little bit of an issue, but the offensive line's been banged up, and the running back position is you've lost three studs and have essentially put everything on a freshman running back who's been good, but still they have not been healthy. But when they have been healthy, you've seen them play at a high level. So I think for Georgia, which is kind of why I did not want them going to Atlanta, because I think they could have benefited from having, season's over. Let's just get healthy and get ready for the playoff stretch, especially if they get a home playoff game. But they'll still obviously get some time off. But if you get now a Nate Frazier who's playing at a high level, you get Trevor Etienne back, you get Branson back, you get Dylan Bell and all these guys. You get an offensive line that's healthy and back. You get the defensive line that's been banged up this year. You get all those guys healthy and back. I don't know what's going to happen with Colby Young and the legal battle, but maybe he's back on the football team. So I think for Georgia right now, they're going to be peaking at the right time where it felt like a year ago they were heading in the opposite direction because of injuries. Yeah. So if they can stay healthy versus Tech, if they can stay healthy in the SEC championship game, and they have their guys up front, if they have their guys at running back, if they have their guys at defensive line, which it's trending in that direction, I'm with you. I think they have the best roster along with Ohio State in college football. And then it just comes out to a point of, can you make some plays on the outside? Because that has been kind of the area they've been lacking, but have looked like they've improved for the past 2 weeks.
And Carson Beck's been getting dunked on all year long for the interceptions, but I'm we all saw how good he is. We've seen what he can be with weapons around him when he's not forcing the football downfield. I still think they can win a national championship with him. I'm curious to what you just spoke to. Can they support him enough with the ground game to be able to play complementary offensive football? Can we have some more guys step up? It looked like Oscar Delp kind of stepped up in that game against Tennessee. I think Carson Beck's still good enough to win a national championship. Is that reaching too much? Is it not a Carson Beck-driven operation if you do win a natty? Where do you fall in the whole Carson Beck conversation as it pertains to Georgia bringing home all the hardware?
I don't think it has to be a Carson Beck, or it should be a Carson Beck-driven where Carson's going out there having to throw 3 or 4 touchdowns. I think a lot of people obviously compare not from an attribute standpoint of Carson's the same as Stetson, but what made Stetson in my opinion, the greatest quarterback in Georgia history is the fact that he played elite in crunch time, whether that was SEC championship games, playoff games, national championships. He was the MVP. Was he 4-time MVP between playoff games and national championships over that 2-year span? So he played big in big-time games. And I think Carson feels like he has to be that guy every single week, and that gets him into trouble. And I'm not saying Carson needs to be 17 of 25 for 180 and a touchdown and no picks, and Georgia's going to win the football game. He still has to play at a high level. But just like we talked about with Jalen Milroe previously, if Carson has to shoulder the entire burden, I don't think Georgia wins a championship. the defense still, the other teams right now are too good to go against Georgia and say, oh my God, if we just slow down Carson a little bit, we're going to be fine. The receivers have to be better. The tight ends have to be better. The running game has to be better. And the past 2 weeks, you're starting to see that happen. Oscar's making plays. Yursek's making plays. I think Lawson Lucky's been great all season. The offense line's been really good. Like I said, when you get ETN and the running backs healthy, I think that's a really good stable of running backs. So the pieces around him are starting to come together to a point where I feel like he's not feeling like he has to be Superman. And if he plays within himself, the kid is uber talented. I've been high on Carson Beck for 3-4 years now since the first time I saw him in a scrimmage. He looks like a first-round talent when he's not trying to be Superman. And he just needs to realize that. Just the old saying, do less. Just be you, Carson. Don't feel like you got to put the cape on.
Hey, just be yourself. Everyone else is already taken, right? Isn't that what they put on like the motivational posters? Like every I feel like Disney Channel movie would end with that quote, which I was like, hey, there's a lot of value in that, and that's good news for Carson Beck and good maybe wisdom for Carson Beck. Last Georgia question for you that I want to get a Thanksgiving take from you before we let you go. The secondary for Georgia is uber talented, like Malachi Starks, KJ Bolden's a phenom, true freshman. We go down the line here, a lot of dudes. I'm worried a little bit about that unit based on a couple of different appearances this season. The Alabama game, obviously, even the Mississippi State game, which is maybe a little bit of like beefed up numbers because they're so air raid. But there's a couple of spots here where I'm like, dang, I don't love the way that looks. Do you feel the same way as I do about the secondary, or like what's the overall confidence level they're going to be good enough to get to where Georgia wants to go?
No, I'm definitely concerned.
Against Texas, potentially, yeah. So
Texas, then Ohio State, then Oregon. I mean, numerous teams in the that will be in the playoffs that you may have to face somewhere along the line that can throw the football. I mean, let's think back to even when Georgia was quote unquote elite at the defense side of the football. Obviously mobile quarterbacks give everyone a trouble, but go back to that Ohio State game 2 years ago in Atlanta. Where Ohio State has an opportunity to win that football game. They threw it all over Georgia's secondary. And that was one of the best secondaries in college football that year. So, I've always had this opinion, and obviously it didn't play out super well for me a year ago versus when it came to Washington and Michigan. But I just think it's because Michigan was just so much more dominant in the trenches that it just overwhelmed Washington when it's all said and done. But there's very few teams at any level that can cover multiple talented receivers along with a good, accurate quarterback. And what is Oregon and what is Ohio State? Two quarterbacks that are playing at a high level right now, two receiving cores that have not just one elite receiver, but two, if not three, elite receivers. So it comes down to depth thing. Teams do not have 2 or 3 or 4 good DBs that can match up. But I will say this about Georgia, though, and this is one of the most impressive things about Malachi Starks. Malachi obviously is a safety. He can play single high safety. He can rotate in the box. But the one thing that you've seen Malachi do more this year is play nickel position, where Malachi Starks is playing one-on-one coverage against a slot receiver. And a lot of these offenses nowadays, they move their star receivers around where they're not just playing the X or the Z, they're playing the Y, they're playing in the slot, and he's running stride for stride for them. So, he is such a Swiss Army knife on defense that you can move him around a little bit based on the team you're going against, like in Oregon. Hey, man, we're going to put him more in the slot because he can tackle those quick bubble screens on the outside. So I think he's going to have to play at that I'm the best safety in college football mentality if and when they face Texas, Ohio State, Oregon, if they're going to want to be able to protect that back end going forward.
Hey, selfishly, we get Ohio State, Georgia at any point in the college football playoff. Jeremiah Smith on one side, Malachi Starks on the other. I mean, just clash. I would be all that in itself. Just give me the ISO camera there, and I'll watch that battle all day long and just enjoy the heck out of it.